The other thing you can do is tell them they have the right to have restitution. In some crimes, the judge can order restitution, and when the person is released on supervision from a state or federal institution, and they're under some form of supervised release, they can have restitution ordered so that the payments can be garnered from their wages and paid to the crime victims specifically who were involved. The other form of compensation is called civil justice. There is an organization now called Victim Bar, www.victimbar.org, and they have attorneys in all 50 states that are civil justice attorneys who will help a crime victim obtain a civil remedy in a civil court for the wrongful death or the negligence that were involved in this particular crime. You may recall the O.J. Simpson case, in which he was found not guilty criminally, but in civil court he was found guilty. That was a civil matter with a civil judgment. These basic rights, P-A-N-I-C, don't panic, because you have these basic rights, are fundamental to the understanding of helping crime victims. You, as a spiritual leader, by being informed of these rights, can help crime victims be better informed and access their rights. The second thing you need to understand as a spiritual leader are what I call stages of grief. And this applies to crime victims of any form of serious violent crime, and it can even be a serious property crime like identity theft if it has a major impact. The stages of grief, basically the first, say, 0 to 7 days, when you hear that a loved one has been murdered, or when you're a victim of a rape, or if you're a child and you're molested, you're in shock, you're numb, you're disoriented or dysfunctional. There's sort of a denial aspect. You can't believe, or you disbelieve, that this actual crime is even happening. And there's a period of time where you just can't really respond too well to what people are saying or doing, because the shock and numbness sets in to protect your body from the horrible news that it has just experienced. Adrenaline goes through you, cortisol shoots through your body, you're in a stressful feeling, a stressful reaction is occurring because of this trauma from this crime. There are various stages that you're going to go through as a crime victim, and any spiritual leader working with you needs to understand that these are normal reactions to a very abnormal situation, the serious violent crime or serious property crime that has occurred. You can feel a sense of rage, anger, and you can blame people. You can feel a sense of sadness or depression, and you can feel guilty yourself, like somehow, if only I had done this, or I should have done that, it could have changed the outcome of this crime. You can feel a sense of shame, in the sense that this is now a crime that you don't want to talk about to everybody. A crime has now occurred in your family, like a murder or DUI fatality, and sometimes even family members conduct this crime against other family members, which leads to a different form of shame and guilt, that somehow you should have stopped it, and now you're feeling that these two family members who have hurt each other, you're torn because these are people that you've once loved as a family member. I call it the mad and sad yo-yo. You might be mad for 5 minutes, and 2 minutes later you may be crying and be very tearful and sad. The up and down aspect and high and low aspect of these stages of grief are not sequential. You don't go through, the initial shock and numbness and confusion, and then 3 days later you go through anger, and 3 days later you go through depression. It's not sequential. It occurs at up and down levels for a period of normally 2 to 5 years, but we've had cases that have even lasted much longer. So these stages of grief that occur among crime victims are going to be flowing in and out and and in a sort of a curving way like this, where you'll go in and be very at a low edge of depression, and then you'll move up, be kind of through hypervigilance, you might become more vigilant in terms of being angry and resentful and blaming. And in fact, rage is a better word that I have experienced among the several hundred people that I have counseled in homicide co-victim support groups and individual and family sessions. These stages of grief and a proper understanding of them are crucial to you as a spiritual leader. The final phase that people go through is what's called the recovery phase. Some people say it's reconstructing your equilibrium, or building a new life, or moving on and assimilating this horrible trauma of this crime into your overall life experiences in such a way that you can handle it. One person, Howard Zier, in his book Changing Lenses, he calls it letting go of the power that the offense and the offender has over you in your life, and you begin to assimilate it well enough to adjust and start reconstructing a new life. That final phase we also sometimes refer to as the spiritual healing phase. You are reconnecting with God, you're reconnecting with your neighbor, and you have lost a sense of innocence or vulnerability because this horrible crime has occurred to you. Just imagine how everyone felt after September 11th. We felt more vulnerable. We felt that if this kind of attack was possible, that we were not as safe. And that feeling is a normal feeling after a very horrible crime has occurred. Well, the spiritual aspects are so important to be dealt with, because sometimes when you as a spiritual leader, you're very often the first person contacted, and they might want to do a memorial or a funeral to the loss of a loved one. They might want to call you after a rape or child molestation for spiritual care and comfort and counseling. You're oftentimes the first person to hear about a tragedy in a faith community, and you hear about it on the streets around the faith community in which you're practicing as a spiritual or lay leader. So your response is very important. And the first thing that you need to say to a crime victim is, I am very sorry that this crime has happened to you. And just listen and allow that crime victim to talk to you and to unburden some of their feelings. You as a spiritual leader at that moment are a ministry of presence. You're listening to the pain, you're listening to the anger, you're listening to the sadness and depression, and you're understanding that that's all a normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. You are trying to reflect the feeling levels and somewhat be a reflective listener in that moment, letting them know that you're hearing the underlying feelings and the content of the message that they're giving you. Those are basically the stages of grief that we have experienced in the Crime Victim Advocacy Council, or CVAC as we're often called, after 15 years of counseling crime victims. And I hope that's helpful to you as a spiritual leader.